I'm Dave Davies. I'm the Director of ESHQ, so Environment, Safety, Health and Quality for DBD. This is my colleague, Carrie Rowley, the Director of Nuclear Safety.
Hi. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about the Nuclear Regulatory Review because it sparked quite an interesting conversation around safety, around accountability, and specifically around the UK nuclear regulatory system.
It has.
It really has. And it's we're going to have a conversation around what the report says, why it was commissioned, and what the findings mean for the UK regulatory system and for the nuclear industry as a whole.
It's going to be huge, isn't it?
I think so. So, Dave, what is it about? Why did we need a review?
So yeah, to look forward, we need to look back, right? And I think it's really important to understand where we've come from. So back in the 50s and the 60s, the UK, we were at the forefront of nuclear power, right? We commissioned somewhere in the order of 10 new power stations in 10 years, which is no mean feat. And then you sort of bring it forward now into sort of recent times, and it's a lot slower.
It's almost gone completely opposite. We've done one in the last 10 years, haven't we?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And for a number of different reasons. And so you look at that and you look at where we are with geopolitical situation, where we need to secure our energy usage for the UK. So you've got things like new builds that are coming up to the SMR, the small modular reactors that are looking at going in at Wilbur, the Rolls-Royce design. We look at then how we want to secure defence capabilities moving forward. There's some really, really big topics that we need to be dealing with. But then you also have to go full circle, right? Because a lot of those stations that were commissioned back in the 50s and 60s, they're now at the point of the end of their life cycle, right? So they're being decommissioned. So there's a number of different elements of first-of-a-kind approaches for the decommissioning elements as well. And so if you look at all of that holistically and wanting to be ahead of the game in terms of building and commissioning and operating these new nuclear stations, nuclear reactors, we need to deal with the narrative that's out there that from a UK point of view, it's very expensive for new build in terms of nuclear. The regulatory system is complex. It's very difficult to do things for a number of different reasons. And ultimately, all of that leads to it very, very, very expensive.
That is exactly what the report concluded, that the UK is the most expensive country to do nuclear new build in, and it's also the process of decommissioning as well. There's loads of opportunity there to reduce the cost of that. It's all the review concluded that is because of our regulatory system. And it didn't mince its words. It said that we need a radical reset if we're going to take advantage of the opportunities we've got in new build and also minimising the cost of decommissioning. It set out 47 different recommendations on how we can do that. And the information that they used, it was gathered from across, they did lots of investigations, they did loads of workshops, they did a public inquiry. So they gathered information from across the industry, lots of different opinions, came up with these 47 recommendations for how it can be done. And they were around simplifying the regulatory system. So one example is having just a lead regulator instead of the multiple ones that we have at the moment. So you have one for safety, one for the environment, and then there's different environmental regulators depending on which part of the country you're in. Then there's more regulators in the defence sector as well.
Yeah.
And then another aspect of it was around making decision-making more proportionate. So becoming less risk-averse and actually taking back the concept of the as low as reasonably practicable concept to what it was actually meant to be, in that the idea isn't to drive risk down to zero. It is actually to reduce risks to the point where it's no longer cost effective to reduce risk anymore.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then there was lots of recommendations around reducing the complexity of safety cases and environmental impact assessments.
Indeed.
And all that kind of comes to the goal of making the nuclear industry far more cost effective and faster at delivering its missions.
I think that's a really good point, particularly you listen to what's going on in the GBEN world. The slogan is deliver at pace, right? Yeah. So to deliver at pace, we need to understand the challenges that we've got, whether they're perceived or real.
Yeah, and the government is behind this now, and that's what's going to make the difference, is that there's this massive driver behind actually changing things, really doing things differently.
It was great. It was great to see the kind of acceptance of the report from a governmental point of view, because you're absolutely right. Without having that sort of senior steer, I think it could have been very easy for people to not do a lot, really.
Yeah, definitely. And so there's these 47 recommendations, and we can't talk about all of them today, can we? It would take far too long. But so what we thought is we would have a chat about one that's particularly important to us, one that we like, because it brings together our two areas of expertise, doesn't it? And that's looking at the issue of conflation of nuclear and conventional hazards.
Yeah.
So what on earth is ARTO?
So absolutely. So as you said, 47 recommendations. That's a whole season, a season or a series in its own right? But so if you look at recommendation 10, you're absolutely right. So it talks around removal of conflation of conventional and nuclear safety. And I think it's, again, one of those points where it's good to understand what the word conflation is, because I've been having a chat with various different people in various different forums, and people get a bit like, what is it? What's conflation mean? And the reality is, it's absolute core conflation very much is just looking at removing of complexity, removing of the position where one ties into the other, so they're layered upon each other. And I think a very good simple way to look at it is, if you're doing a construction or undertaking construction, then you would expect to address the hazards, the risks, and mitigation in the realm of general construction areas.
There's no radiological hazard associated with constructing a facility, is there? Because there's no inventory in there.
And you'll follow the controls, the requirements associated with the various different legislations that are out there associated with the regulations. So lifting operations, COSH for chemicals, asbestos, all that sort of thing, right? And that's right, and that's proper. Then from a nuclear point of view, when you're going down the avenue of dealing with a nuclear inventory, then there are different requirements, there are different levels of controls associated with it. And that's fine, and that's right, and that's proper as well. The issue of conflation comes in where you've got truly conventional hazards that should be addressed as a conventional hazard, and then you put nuclear controls over the top, and you would essentially over-engineer solutions.
It's disproportionate, isn't it?
Disproportionate, which ultimately leads to longer designs, because you're putting in controls and such that you don't need. It's more costly to everybody, whether it be the client, a public industry, or even the regulators, or not the regulators, the various different parties and the government. Why would you do that? So it's very much centered around separating that out.
It's very likely that you're over-engineering your solutions, aren't you, if you're putting nuclear controls into what is actually just a conventional hazard.
And you're absolutely right. And I think one of the other things you mentioned, like the environmental side of things, the environmental impact assessment, whilst maybe it doesn't naturally sit within the recommendation 10 area, it's being utilised there are a number of different case studies that are being utilised to illustrate the challenges that are out there associated with the nuclear industry, right? And if you look at the environmental impact assessments for Sizewell C and then Hinkley Point C, they are in the order of 40 to 44,000 pages, respectively, right?
Crazy, isn't it?
And no one, and I certainly would argue that you have to do an environmental impact assessment associated with the build of said facilities. It's absolutely right and proper. But when you then look at that magnitude of essentially, and it's being talked around by people like Sue Eon, who was part of the task force, the regulatory task force that did the work, safety by paper, Because when you've got that much information, how are you going to utilize it in a way which is useful to the end user?
We calculated, didn't we, how long it would take to just read 44,000 pages. And at 8 hours a day, it was over 3 months, wasn't it? And just how can you possibly comprehend that amount of information and actually take something useful and of value from that? It seems unfathomable to me that we can actually do that it's going to be actually useful. And actually what came out of that impact assessment was a £700 million system for protecting fish, wasn't it, as well, which seems an astronomical amount of money to protect in what I think was not that many fish. And that is the perfect example of where nuclear controls have been placed on what is actually a conventional hazard. And it's been disproportionately applied to a conventional hazard. And well, I think there's lots of examples of that. And I think there's actually, in my experience, there's been examples where to manage a radiological hazard, and it can be a really minimal radiological hazard, you can actually create significant conventional hazards, which is even worse. And I think there's definitely a really strong case to manage this conflation and to do something about making sure that they're kept in the right lanes, that conventional hazards, when they're purely conventional hazards, are managed as such, and you keep the nuclear controls, the stringent nuclear controls, for genuine hazards.
Where they're needed. I think it's a really, and obviously we're talking around the general kind of the case study that is the environmental impact assessment. And I think it's important to say that when we're having this conversation, we're not passing judgment on that, right? It is what it is. That the individuals that have created these documents, they've done it as they were required to do it, with the processes and requirements they needed to follow. But what comes out in the report is very much centered around, how do we make it simpler? How do we remove that duplication? How do we remove that conflation? You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting times, isn't it? Because there's lots of different recommendations within the review that we will get to at some other point maybe. But in the meantime, what does this mean for DBD? What are we doing about it?
Again, great question. So we've been very, very lucky actually over the last few months to be working with a client who's taken the nuclear regulatory review with both hands.
Well, there's lots of actions on duty holders, licensees, isn't there, within the review?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been working with them to help them understand where they are on their journey associated with all of the great phenomenal work they've already done previously, how that's helped them get to the position that they're in now, and then understanding what do they need to do moving forward to ultimately take them to a position of being able to truly demonstrate that they've embodied the intention of the recommendations. And it's been a really, really good journey. It's been really, really exciting, to be honest, to actually take a step back and deal with something that I think, you and I, we've talked about it a lot in terms of the industry, never mind what's in the report, the perception and the challenges with how long things can take.
I think everyone who works in the nuclear industry has experienced the frustration of how long it takes to get things done in this industry.
Absolutely. And it's really, really refreshing to have this, for want of a better term, this burning bridge that's out there for the industry to go, you need to do something different.
Real driver now to do things different.
And I love the statement of once in a lifetime generational change. I think we are right on that cusp. And to be working with the client that we're working with now and supporting them on that journey and helping that level of transformation it's just great, right? So it's like going back to my fun place, right? It's
taking things to the next level, because here at DBD, it is our mission to make a difference. And in the past, we've done that project by project, but we've actually got the opportunity here to do it at an industry level.